So welcome to Livestream, and tonight the title is Food Meters, Not Food Miles. So we're going to talk about the food that we have created here over the last 6 months. We've only got 8 weeks to go before our time finishes here at Fed Square. It's been a pretty exciting time, and first of all I want to start by congratulating Joe on World's 50 Best, winning Best or Next Chef's 50 Best.
Bit of a tongue twister. So last night Matt and I were awarded the 50 Next award. So it's part of the 50 best restaurants and bars where they're graded throughout the world for outstanding service and culinary experience and food. And 50 Next is an offshoot of that around people shaping the culinary scene. So I feel very fortunate to be recognised for our work, and we're amongst some incredible people changing the shape of food around sustainability, farming practices, technology, and Douglas McMaster was also a part of that, and you can kind of see what Jost's impact has been in the culinary world, even though you're a florist.
Not even a professional florist, work that one out.
So thank you, and we feel very flattered to receive that.
No, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And
congrats.
It's really interesting that we're in the middle of this project, which has really pushed us all creatively. So I'd love to know what you think. Do you think an urban food system has a future?
I 100% think that after living here and being a part of this project and seeing the people that have come through and people that we've spoken to, that there's definitely a movement towards getting back into the food system, but people being more conscious about where they're living, what they're eating, they care about their health. So I'm not sure if we're ready to adopt a full house like this. I think people are looking to implement different systems in their existing dwellings and in their lifestyles in general. But I feel like what makes it so interesting that it will be achievable is just the amount of interest.
Yeah.
And for me living here, it's easy. Like, I'm surprised by the amount of food, but also, I thought it was going to be a lot more work. I really expected that each time, throughout the day, we would have to deal with the mushroom wall, deal with the biodigester, deal with aquaponic systems, because when we were doing the build, it felt like a lot of time was just sitting up there watching the aquaponic system and wondering if fish were going to jump out or if they were going to die. And I was like, how are we ever going to cook or tend to the garden if we're worried about fish dying? But then now that we're going, I actually go up and sit there because I want to watch them.
For me, I kind of feel like I understood balance, but I never really appreciated how crucial it is. Balance in nature, balance in everything. And it wasn't until the aquaponics system when we got that in balance. It's like, I remember walking up the stairs especially the first 4 weeks, and you could smell that it wasn't in balance. Either not enough fish or too many fish, and once the beds were growing properly, and you could I remember walking up one morning, and do you remember at the start, every morning was like the first, you'd race up the stairs because the first thing you'd want to see is the fish. Fuck, have we lost any fish? Or, how are the yabbies going? And I could just smell that it was right. And then, you could just see the biology and the worms and everything. Since then, it has just been a breeze. And really, that's a metaphor for the whole planet, really. I mean, if the planet is in balance and everything is working properly, then...
I definitely agree. I think it was very... a big shock to realise that it only takes a small thing to throw everything out of balance. And I didn't realise how crucial each individual person is a part of an ecosystem. And that's probably now become, after working on this, something that's become more important to me, or trying to get that message across to people that more than ever, you can actually make a change.
Yep.
So I think that's quite an inspiring thing. I never expected. I thought, we've definitely come out of this with better recipes, different ways to cook, but coming out of it with empowerment that you can definitely make a change
Yeah.
through maybe just doing one small act of this place. And it could be just growing food.
You know, also for Lou as well, for you, when we started, you know, we had this ridiculous amount of zucchinis and we worked at 100 different ways of using zucchinis. But like, I remember one of the first things that Matt cooked when we were building still was like, he just grabbed a whole bunch of stuff and threw it together and just, it tasted so good, you know. So that's you can't get away from having something that's so fresh. And, you know, growing food where you live, it's like an egg, like what you made today. If you go and buy an egg from a shop, even if it's from a really well, you know, looked after chicken, it's not the same as, you know, an egg that you've grabbed from a chicken that's had this diverse diet of, you know, crickets and whatever else it is that we're throwing out, you know. So what about you? You know, how do you feel about, because I know that you've grown up with parents that were quite into growing their own food.
Yeah. Well, the way that the house is kind of a modern take, I guess, on the way that I grew up, with more technological systems, because we always had all those things, the garden, the chickens. And I guess I sort of took it for granted. But I think that the time that this has come has been perfect as well, just because, like, this is a perfect example. We're sitting here slowly shelling pistachios. Because people, after all the lockdowns and last year and stuff, had this sort of like, you saw it globally, like a movement back to slower things and people actually having time to pick up all these hobbies and things that people did in the past, slower ways of making food, and a return to all of those techniques, traditions.
Yeah.
So it's sort of come at the perfect time as people have gotten back into those things in the last year as well.
And people have more time.
And people,
they're working from home more.
People do probably have more time, or COVID has given people an opportunity to go, oh, maybe more time is what I want, or I actually love baking, or I actually love fermenting, or I love gardening, or stuff like that. So
yeah, I think it's been a really good reminder when we have cooked for people. They always like the dish that's often the simplest.
Yep.
Yeah.
But has been, I mean, we're cooking with everything from here and people are loving it. But I think when you're a chef or when you're entertaining friends and family or people, you always hesitate, like, oh, have I put enough effort into it to make this kind of fancy enough?
Yeah, for me what's been interesting is the really like classically nourishing dishes like the grain risotto or something. I've been thinking, oh, is that what I hesitate and go, is that what this person wants? They don't look like
grains.
That's the type of person that wants to eat sprouted grains. But it's been really interesting to see that, they are the dishes that people seem to actually love, probably because they are nourishing and your body's just craving that.
Yeah.
So
from
without even thinking about it, but you don't often see that as a cook or as a chef as well, because you're not.
One thing I always say to people as well is when they grow food, everyone always plans too much. And so when you grow your own food, you always have, you know, just plant one zucchini instead of planting 5. You only need to plant 3 tomato plants instead of planting 30, or you only need to plant 2 cucumbers.
I often do wish that I was a chef when I was a kid, because the amount of zucchinis and eggs and stuff, like, you know, my parents weren't chefs, they weren't as inventive. It was like, oh, we're going to have like an omelette all the time, the same one.
Like for me, you know, I've got this massive veggie patch, and it's always a lot of work, and there's a lot of time spending weeding, and it's just made me realise. I said to Jen this year, I'm going to plant sunflowers, and I'm just going to plant it full of. I'm not going to actually plant veggies in it for next summer. I'm going to do everything in barrels, because it's just so much easier and it's so much more productive, and you know, you don't lose the nutrients, and you don't have to water as much, and you know, for me that lives on a farm, to transition to a system, this was designed for an urban location. It's actually much better, much more productive, and
well, I guess it goes back to the garden under your nose thing as well.
Yeah. So it's like, for me, for someone that's grown food for most of my life, it's like I've learned so much from these last 6 months, just because I've gone far out. This is so much less than what I would grow at home, but I seem to be harvesting so much more because you're focused on getting the most out of every ingredient that you grow. And, you know, the fact that you've got beans running up corn, and there's the girls, there's Stephanie, and there's trying to get in. And the family only really needs 2 chooks. You don't need more than that. You don't eat 5 eggs a day.
No.
But if they're really amazing eggs, and and then you make sure you don't waste them, and all that sort of stuff. So what are your top 3 so far?
Top 3 favourite things that we've been cooking would have to be parsnips,
That was pretty epic.
which is really random because I do really like parsnips, but the smell of parsnips when you pull them out of the ground is epic.
Yeah.
And we just made a soup, and I'm a big fan of soup, and I know Lou is a real big soupy fan.
Massive broth fan.
But then we have figured out a way with the barbecue to smoke them, and to be able to smoke. We smoked a trout, and when you freshly smoke a trout, and it's not from a refrigerator, like we know a restaurant, we had smoked trout at Oak Ridge, but then you would stick it in the fridge, have it for service. But here, to be able to smoke it, and then the texture.
That was actually game changing, because we've been smoking trout for 4 years, and we're kind of a bit like, all right, a smoked trout, good, we've been doing that. But just the difference between just smoking it fresh and never actually chilling it, because it's just like, it's a different product, because the flesh is all smooth and you don't have that congealed fat between the
Serving
flakes
that
of
on
fish.
It's my favourite dish too.
Yeah, that was amazing. One day Matt pulled some carrots out of the ground, and I know parsnip and carrot are pretty similar. I remember actually on my apprenticeship going into the core room and pulling out some parsnips and saying to Andrew, who was my head chef at the time, "Why are these carrots white?"
It's an heirloom carrot.
He's like, "That's a parsnip." So he just cooked the carrots in a small amount of water, and then with olive oil. And I don't know why. I don't know if because they were all gnarled, they held on to the olive oil with salt and pepper, and it was
But
one
also
of
the
sort of-
greens.
oh,
remember,
you-
he
that's- yeah.
boiled the greens and then collected the oil off the top and cooked them.
that
in
was one of the most incredible thing, but it was because the texture of the carrot was really dense.
And just
not
because the
filled with
carrots
water.
were so delicious. Yeah, they were really dense, and then the carrots just
Yeah.
tasted
It's often been
so much of a carrot.
been textures, the things that I've loved the most. I also taste more with texture.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
fresh vegetables or fruits have a better texture than what I've had before. And I think that comes 100%, that's from growing food. See, they love it. They want to get in.
I know.
Yeah, what's...
I reckon following on from the texture thing, like we made once, we've been making a lot of broth from the bones and shells from the seafood we're using from the aquaponics, but also from the mushroom wall.
Yeah.
And
Remember that one?
Yeah,
Had
that's what
all
I was gonna
those-
talk
all
about.
Those lines, mate.
so we made one mushroom broth specifically. We've been making lots of different kinds, but one that we had a lot of lion's mane mushrooms that were left from the wall that were a bit big and funny ones. So we put this many lion's mane mushrooms in one pot, like that size on the stove. And it was like, it's like this, I don't want to say slippery because that makes it sound bad. It was like it had naturally viscous, naturally
Yeah.
thickened, unctuous quality about it. It was amazing.
And the flavour.
And I mean, honestly, that's not something you would usually do in a restaurant because no one's going to spend this much money on putting this many lion's manes into a broth. But things like that for me have been amazing.
Yeah.
Same with when your girls brought in all those mushrooms, just
Yeah.
putting that many things into one broth.
I mean, that's one thing that, the idea of the mushroom wall and mucking around with it at home, but like that level of productivity, like my mum's already like thinking about, I'm going to have an honesty box out the front to. So
Yeah.
there's
Or
no
she's just
way
going to have
no-
to give like delicious broth to all her friends because
Yeah.
I would be
But
stoked if I had that
it's
at
just
my house.
incredible how much you can grow from that.
And it's also good to
Yeah.
see as well if you had that mushroom wall and some of the mushrooms aren't working out because of
Carbon
product problems with your wall, that you can still use those mushrooms in other ways as well. So it's not like there's any waste in the sense that you might not be getting it right or the balance might not be in for a bit, but you can still use all of those mushrooms to make a broth and to use all of the other vegetables and things that you've got in the garden to go into that, no matter whether they look perfect or they're growing in the way that you expected or not, there's still
Yeah.
always a use for them.
Yeah, one of the best examples of that was when we got those giant zucchinis, and everyone always has the giant
Everyone
zucchini
has that problem. Yeah.
and the melon balling the outside, so you still get the texture of a normal zucchini, but then utilising the centre, which is often really watery and bitter, by charring it. So charring increases bitterness anyway. So by really going for it and making like the baba ganoush, so we had sesame seeds and we had lemons, Maya lemons, and we made a really delicious,
It's a really
smoky
rustic,
puree,
smoky baba ganoush.
and then put the barbecued melon balled zucchini on top, and I was like, this is
And
an
green
amazing
chickpeas?
dish.
Yep.
Yeah, and then chickpeas the same size, and that for me was like, okay, well, this is a really useful thing. And that was the purpose of the project.
I've kind of found is that you think it's limiting, but in all honesty, the food that we've done in the last 6 months is much more biodiverse than what most people would consume in their lives. You know, which is, and we haven't even really explored, like there's nothing that's planted here that is a long-term thing like grapes or passion fruit, or there's so many things that need to be grown up walls and
Yeah, these are all
so
pretty
when the house-
fast-growing.
Yeah,
things.
this is just an annual crop thing, you know, so it's going to be really exciting in 5 years' time, I think, to see you know, how interesting the food it could be off like a tiny footprint like this. Like my dream always was to try and create like the most biodiverse 100 square meters on Earth, and I really am confident that we can do that.
Have you been surprised by having the aquaponics system and putting in the yabbies and trout and
It's my favourite
barramundi,
thing.
but the connection that you've had with the animals? Did
Yeah.
you expect to become so close to them?
Well, I mean, I could never eat my own chickens because I love them so much, and I'm starting to feel that way about especially the yabbies. I don't know what it is
I
about
know,
the
the
yabbies.
yabbies.
But I mean, I actually did a post about it yesterday because, you know, I've read so many studies about like the microflora of an aquaponics system and how complex it is and how it doesn't exist anywhere else. So, you know, you grow food can be soil can be incredibly complex, but the soil biology that exists on the edges of creeks and waterways and is a whole different biodiversity that goes on there. And it's because you've got water species mixing with land species, and there's a whole other, and we've created that here, you know, and you can smell it when you walk up, and you can, you know, you're harvesting these incredible greens. And what's hilarious is that we hardly ever have a salad. Yet, you know, if you ask someone 6 months before we started, what are you going to live off? Like a salad for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And the ironic thing is
We've had like one salad the
I
whole time.
know, and I find that hilarious, you know, because obviously it's the easiest thing in the world to do is to make a salad here, but it's the one thing that we haven't done, and you know, for me, I feel so much more confident in the idea, and I think that we're only scratching the surface of what the possibilities are.
Yeah, there's one part of this house that I couldn't get my head around at the start and was a bit, not grossed out by, but was the biodigester. And even, you know, talking about it with people about harvesting not only just food waste, but waste from a toilet, I was like, that's pretty hardcore. And now that idea doesn't seem foreign to me at all. And it is such a thing, like a crazy thing that we're not utilising. And that's often the response from the tours and having people through. People are really interested in it, and when you tell them about that, it's an hour of flame that a person can produce. It's you can tell people are like, why are we not doing that? And I feel confident to talk about it now, but when at the start I kind of didn't know about it, and I thought it was a bit weird, but it's not.
Imagine if like you had a unit that looked like a dishwasher, or looked like a washing machine, or looked like some contraption, and you said, this contraption, this machine will convert all of your organic waste into pelletized organic fertilizer that the plants will go crazy for. People go, yeah, I want one of those machines in every house. Well, that's pretty much what that does. It actually transforms a problematic, you know, it's 45% of what goes to landfill. That's what causes bins to smell. It's a huge issue. But if we stop looking at it as a problem and as something that, you know, we need to get rid of and start looking at it as a resource, we're sitting on a potential energy source that is beyond comprehension, much more energy than we could possibly use. And then transforms that material into this incredible fertilizer, which then plants go crazy for.
What? Someone did ask.
Why do they want to come in? It's hilarious.
It's warm in here. But when that is fermenting and it produces methane, what happens? Is there solid waste? Because we haven't had any solid waste that we've had to discard yet. Do you have to get to a point where you will need to...
It breaks it down, so the bacteria pulls it apart and breaks it down, basically, and turns it into a liquid form.
Yeah, well,
And it's something that actually happens anyway. So
Yeah.
if you were going to compost it in a composter, or it just breaks down and you threw it out, or you had it in like a Werribee sewage farm or something like that, the methane releases anyway. So that methane is something that gets released. So all you're doing here is stopping that methane from entering the atmosphere by harnessing it and capturing it and using it. And yeah, I really believe that out of all the ideas, that's the one that has the biggest potential to, if every house in the world had one, you know, our carbon emissions would plummet because it's such a big driver of emissions. It's much more harmful to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. And so, yeah, I really hope that that's an idea that, and to be honest, I've had some really, some very powerful people that are in positions of where that kind of idea can be implemented, interested in it. And it's a real global movement towards harnessing that.
I think at the start of this project, I thought, great, we'll see how many people we can impact and get in touch with. But now I think it's more about just raising the idea, and then eventually that idea might be arisen again by somebody else, and then somebody else, and then once that kind of is affirmed to you many times, then
it's
you
just
might
like planting
make a change.
seeds.
Yeah.
Then.
So it's actually really nice just for the first time someone to come in here or to share something like that.
Yeah.
And to spark an idea that then they go on their own journey. So it's almost like a release of you don't have to have all the answers.
No.
It's just about your experience.
Well, it's like silo. You know, we created a whole bunch of zero waste systems. That wasn't, okay, this is it, now everybody goes and does it. It's like work out there's a million other solutions out there. So, you know, it's like, I just think about the 30,000 potential plants that are edible that we could be growing. There's so many things that I wanted to grow here that we haven't grown. Like I haven't grown peanuts. I was desperate to grow peanuts here because I would have done so well here because you got such a long season, the soil's warm.
I mean, that's the other thing. You never think, I could grow peanuts, but we grew chickpeas as well.
Bananas.
Yeah, that was weird.
They were delicious.
And, you know, the buckwheat was a game changer for me. I never grew that before, and I could not believe how much buckwheat you can grow just off a few barrels, you know. And
that was a big struggle. Buckwheat, I found really productive crop, amazing toasted, but then I think I've made 15 loaves of bread out of buckwheat flour. Yeah. And really struggled with getting one that you want to eat like a whole slice. It's still quite bitter.
Yep.
Yeah. And I know that there's people out there making 100% buckwheat bread. I have not succeeded with that. Texture-wise, it's still really nice texture. Put other seeds and things that we're growing, but to be able to eat a whole slice of it and it to be really enjoyable. I think I like that we have alternatives to things that you are used to, like barramundi, so white flesh fish.
Yep.
It's been a great alternative, and it's really easy to apply to applications that we're used to, have been used to in the past. But I can't get that one to taste like sourdough.
We need another 10 years of this, Joe.
So there's enough buckwheat to make another 15 loaves. So.
There's so many things that I keep thinking on when I'm driving here or when I'm working upstairs. Oh, I didn't grow that, and so I'd love to grow that. And yeah, I've stopped looking at books and stuff because I just get, I've got to try this, I've got to try that, you know. But it has definitely given me confidence to know that there's a huge potential for
massive
food. And it's really interesting that there's been great documentaries out and about the destruction of the rainforests and what we're doing to our oceans and all this sort of stuff. But the combination of Seaspiracy coming out and causing such a fuss globally, and this idea that we can somehow sustainably keep doing what we're doing has frustrated me. That walking into a supermarket and seeing a 10-metre section of the tuna aisle, knowing that tuna are in dire straits, and still we happily eat millions of tons of this stuff. I feel that I was frustrated that we couldn't do this project 5 years ago, but I feel that now is the time that everybody seems to be talking about changing our habits, changing our ways, growing things differently, and the debates around agroforestry and getting farms to diversify and create more biodiversity. And, it's the food for me and what you guys have created is being the highlight.
Oh, yeah, it's been really fun. It's not over yet.
No.
So let's talk what today. What do we do today? So we have once a week we have our friend Earl Carter who comes and shoots photographs of the food that we're kind of creating at that very moment. It's really important that it happens weekly because there's constantly changes in what's being harvested and what's being produced and what's ready. And
It's like real-time garden cooking.
So today was some really epic stuff. So we dehydrated some mushrooms using the sun. So they're loaded with vitamin D, a very ancient Siberian method of giving people access to vitamin D during the winter. And then we did that. You made some congee.
Oh, we did a steamed egg custard. So some of the eggs from the girls with a broth made out of all the shells and bones of the fish, and we just steamed it in the oven at 85 degrees. So not really hot steam. It's nice and gentle, and it comes out like a warm custard. And then we just grated the mushrooms over top. They were dry, and it was way better than I expected.
That was delicious.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah. Oh.
So that is something that we're definitely going to pursue and keep trialing. We made tofu for the first time, which was awesome because we had a bumper crop of soybeans. So they were just dried. We soaked them, blended them and added them to water and then passed it and then set them with a seaweed extract. That's something else we've been talking a lot about, which is algae.
Yep.
That's what this project has done, is leads you down different areas of I never thought I'd be reading about algae, but
that
now
was
love
my
it.
intention to have that in this house, but it was one of the many things that we didn't get around to. But it's a definite future food, a future urban crop because it's so easy to do.
So we then served the tofu with some of our peppers, so green peppers and spring onion, which was awesome. And what else did we do? Broth with fish wings.
Yep.
Again, with some pink oyster mushrooms rather than the plain mushrooms that were dried. And I tried to make some baked oats, which were actually a massive failure. So I had made tiger nut milk and then mixed them with oats and an egg.
It did smell good.
Tasted awesome, but what happens is when you cook tiger nuts, they thicken because they're a tuber, like a starch. And I thought I'd put a lot of liquid in there, but it sucked it all up, and we could actually I baked them
Turn it out
and it was like a bouncy ball. So I won't be doing that one again.
Oh well.
The rhubarb, we cooked it with some rhubarb, and the rhubarb was delicious.
Hey Lou, we haven't asked what are your favourite 3 things in the last 6 months?
Ooh, favourite 3 foods or?
Well, things that have kind of
Combo.
Created here and have surprised you.
What has surprised me the most?
Table climbing?
That was quite surprising. Let's go food-wise. Oh.
Tiger nuts have been...
I mean, yeah, I don't want to default back to tiger nuts, but I have never used them before as a chef. So that's been pretty interesting. Just...
How versatile.
Actually, maybe the cooking without any refined sugar has been really interesting. Just
such an easy thing.
Because of the way that it's easy when you don't have sugar, you just don't put sugar in. But you never really, when you do have sugar, you sort of default to it. And some of the results that Joe's been getting or we've been getting by using honey instead of sugar are actually so different.
Yep.
And you probably wouldn't have come across that because you probably would have just gone, oh, well, I'm going to cook a quince, so I'll cook it in a sugar syrup because that's what you do.
What you do. Yeah.
So things like that,
that one,
I think, have been really interesting to see how, and also with the tiger nut, just that natural sweetness is pretty interesting. I still really want to try and find some kind of savoury application for them. I still think it would be interesting. I was talking about maybe if we were making a peanut sauce or something in place of where you would add palm sugar, could be cool.
I know that in Nigeria they do them as a savoury with salt and they roast them and yes.
Maybe
use
like a
some kind
play on.
When you harvest
Sweet,
them
savoury.
fresh, they have no sweetness at all. So that's what we found when we picked our tiger nuts. They are still extremely firm but not sweet, and they sweeten over time.
Yeah.
I think actually cooking them fresh would be really cool, but we haven't tried that yet. Yeah.
What else? Well, yeah, definitely the mushrooms.
Yeah.
The mushroom has been one of my favourite things. Especially, I just love cooking with mushrooms, and I think in the absence of having any meat in the house as well, it's been really important.
I think that's one thing that people that have eaten the
I-
mushrooms have been surprised by the texture and the
Yeah,
the depth of-
definitely.
I
And
mean, I
I'm
know
pretty
that that's-
obsessed with like bone broth or stock. Like I love chicken stock. So
Yeah.
I think for me, making broth with just the
Don't say that
mushrooms.
near them.
I'm sorry. I think making broth that is actually like I find to be equally as delicious, if not more, with just mushrooms and various
Yeah.
seaweed and
Yeah, they're just
things
there's
like
so much flavour
that.
in vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, just the fact that everything's really flavorful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sort of forget until I go away from it, and then I really crave things that have that level of flavour, and it's probably a lot to do with the nutrient density as well.
Yeah.
I guess that's a pretty typical thing to say as a chef, though. Like, good, amazing produce equals delicious food, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's
It's there for a reason.
it's-
It's said for a reason, for
Yeah.
sure.
it's
Yeah.
true.
Cool. Well, here's
Big
to the
thanks
next
to
8
you,
weeks.
Yosti, for getting us to this point.
Yeah, well, big
And
thanks
pushing?
to you guys
No.
for supporting it. And yeah, it's been pretty tough, especially during COVID and trying to, well, not knowing if we could even get people into the place. That was, for me, the most scariest. Like, why build at Fed Square if no one can actually come and visit the place?
Yeah, the tours have been unreal.
Tours have
Yep.
probably been a highlight. They're exhausting, but they're also really inspiring. And what I've loved about tours, is I've learned as much as what the people that are doing the tours have. Like the lady who's been, growing trout in
Oh,
her
yeah, that was-
backyard
Yeah.
in Northcote for 12 years, and
The conversations here with people have been a highlight as well, for sure. Because
Yeah.
everyone that comes here has all of these interests that somehow relate to things that are going on in their house, but all are sort of coming from different angles.
Yep.
So we've had so many architects and it's not the, I thought it would be, I don't know who I thought would come here, but it's been
Diverse.
so diverse.
Well,
not
and I
just the
think it's
garden.
also because we're not saying, our message has always been this is the only way. It's not. It's like we're just having a crack, and we're so open and honest about what it is that we're doing that I think people feel really comfortable in the space.
Yeah, definitely
to-
the space
to-
as well.
to
People feel
return
really
that,
comfortable
so-
here, and there's been a lot of just a lot of conversations between people where they're teaching you're talking about what's going on here, and you learn so much from people that come in here because everyone has these intersecting interests.
Yeah, I mean, my favourite thing is when people of all ethnic backgrounds say, "Oh, my grandparents used to do this," or
Yeah.
"Oh, this is what we did back in the Ukraine," or "This is what we did." My parents were Chinese, and this is.
Or
how
they
we-"
can tell you the sex of the crickets.
I know. That was so cool that we learned more about crickets from one person that night. I love that this the knowledge is there. We just haven't embraced it, and that's what I suppose this house has done. It's kind of made people realise that our lives and our houses and our urban areas can be so much more than what they already are. And yeah,
Look
appreciate
forward.
you guys supporting the idea and being here. So
We appreciate you.
thanks for joining us. And
Thank you.
quite a few people have requested that we do this because it's been, we didn't do this. The last time we did this was in November, so a lot has happened since then. And so I'm hoping that what we will do in the next, probably in about 6 weeks, is do a Q&A. So if you've got any questions, just go on our Instagram, or we'll make it a way that people can ask questions, so you can actually post questions and we can answer them, because I know there are a lot of people that have got a lot of questions, and when tours happen, it's often difficult to try and answer everyone's question. So yeah, appreciate everyone tuning in and supporting the project. And yeah,
Thank
here's to the
you.
next
Thanks.
8 weeks.